The day I fired my head of security, it wasn't over stolen money or a leaked contract. It was because I watched him laugh at a pregnant woman standing in the rain, and nobody in that lobby thought it was worth stopping. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 36, I run a logistics and shipping company called Cole Meridian out of a glass tower in downtown Charlotte, and by most measures, I had already won whatever game people think matters. 42 floors of employees. A board that answered to me instead of the other way around. A calendar so full that my assistant scheduled my haircuts 3 weeks out because that was the only slot that didn't collide with something worth more money than the haircut. What I didn't have was anyone who talked to me like I was a person instead of a line item. My father built the company from a single delivery van in 1987 and drilled two things into me before he died: never let a driver go hungry on your route, and never let a man in a suit talk over a man in work boots. I'd spent the last 6 years slowly forgetting both rules, one earnings call at a time. That Tuesday in October, I was standing near the lobby windows on a call I don't even remember anymore, watching rain come down sideways off the parking structure, when I saw her. A woman in a soaked company polo, maybe 5'4", hood down because the hood was already useless, both arms wrapped around a delivery bag like it held something more important than takeout. She was pregnant. Visibly, unmistakably pregnant, the kind of pregnant where every step looked like it cost her something. She'd come to drop a food order for someone on the executive floor, and the door attendant, a man named Wallace who worked for my head of security, was standing under the overhang, dry, arms crossed, telling her the loading entrance was around back. In the rain. 6 months along, apparently, by the shape of her, and he was pointing her toward a 100-yard walk in a downpour because the front lobby had a policy about non-badge personnel. I didn't plan what happened next. I just walked out. By the time I reached the door, she'd already turned to go the long way, shoulders hunched, one hand braced low on her back like she was holding herself together by muscle memory. I called out before I thought better of it. "Wait. Come inside." She turned, startled, water running off her chin. "I'm not supposed to come through the front. I don't have a badge." "You do today," I said, and held the door. She hesitated, looking past me at Wallace, who suddenly found something urgent to do with his radio. Then she stepped inside, dripping onto marble that probably cost more per square foot than her monthly rent, and looked at me like she was waiting to be told it was a joke. "Which floor?" I asked. 31. Ortiz, Conference Room B. I picked up the bag from her before she could argue, which surprised her more than the door had. "I've got it from here. I'm supposed to hand it directly to. I own the building the conference room is in," I said. "I think I can manage a handoff." That got the smallest crack of a smile out of her, tired but real. Big talk for a guy holding somebody's lunch. I laughed before I meant to. It had been a while since anyone in that lobby said something to me that wasn't calibrated first. "Ethan," I said, and stuck out my hand like an idiot, forgetting she had 2 full bags and 0 free fingers. "Maya," she said, shifting the second bag onto her hip so she could shake it anyway. Her hand was freezing. "You're soaked," I said. "How long have you been out there?" "Since 6 this morning." "It's fine." It was very clearly not fine, but I recognized the tone. It was the tone of someone who had learned that saying it's fine ended conversations faster than the truth did. I didn't push. I told her to wait by the front desk, walked the food up myself, and when I came back down 12 minutes later, she was gone. Not because she'd finished the delivery. Because Wallace had told her the lobby wasn't a waiting room for outside vendors, and she'd left rather than cause a scene. That was the first time I found out what kind of place I was running when I wasn't looking at it. I didn't fire Wallace that day. I'm not proud of that. I told myself I needed to gather facts first, which is the kind of sentence rich men use to avoid doing the obvious thing immediately. But I pulled the building's delivery logs that night, and I found her name 11 times in the last month alone. Maya Bennett, independent contractor for a courier app called SwiftDash, average of 4 trips a week to our building, always logged as redirected to service entrance, which I now understood meant something closer to sent into traffic in the rain because a badge policy mattered more than a pregnant woman's 15 minutes. I told myself I was going to fix a policy. I didn't expect to spend the next 8 months rearranging my whole life around a woman I'd known for 12 minutes and a bag of takeout. I saw her again 4 days later, on my own initiative this time, because I'd started watching the delivery log like it was a stock ticker. I met her at the service entrance myself, which confused the two guards on duty so badly that one of them radioed upstairs to ask if there was a problem. There wasn't a problem. There was a CEO standing in a loading dock at 7 p.m. holding an umbrella over a delivery driver who kept insisting she didn't need one. "You don't have to do this every time," Maya said, eyeing me like I was some kind of new corporate hazard she hadn't been trained on. "I changed the policy," I said. "Front entrance for all deliveries now. No more service door. That's not why you're standing out here holding an umbrella." She wasn't wrong. I didn't have a good answer, so I didn't give one. Instead, I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest for 4 days. "How far along are you?" Her hand went to her stomach on reflex, the way I'd notice it always did when someone acknowledged it out loud. 6 months. A little over. And you're still doing this? Deliveries, in the rain, on foot. "I'm doing this because the app doesn't pay maternity leave to people who aren't technically employees," she said, flat, like she'd explained it enough times that the sting had worn smooth. "I pick up shifts until the day I physically can't stand up anymore. Then I figure out the next part." I asked what the next part was. She looked at me like the question itself was a kind of luxury. "The next part is I have a baby and I go back to work as soon as I can walk without wincing. That's the next part, Ethan. Most people don't get a next part with a plan attached." I didn't say anything smart. I just stood there holding an umbrella over a woman who had clearly decided a long time ago that asking for help cost more than it was worth. That was the moment I understood I wasn't looking at charity. I was looking at a person who had been doing the math on her own for longer than anyone should have to, and getting it right anyway. The city found out who Maya Bennett was long before I let myself admit what she'd become to me, and it found out the ugly way, which is how small pieces of gossip always travel fastest in a place like a corporate tower, through people with badges talking about people without them. It started small. A comment from an assistant on the 14th floor about the CEO's little delivery hobby. A joke in the executive dining room that died fast when I walked in, but not fast enough that I didn't hear the tail end of it. My head of communications, a sharp, careful woman named Priya, pulled me aside after the 3rd week of my standing habit of meeting Maya at the door. "People are talking," Priya said. "People always talk. It's mostly what this building runs on besides coffee. Ethan. She's a delivery contractor. She's pregnant. And you meet her at the door personally like she's a visiting dignitary. I'm not telling you to stop. I'm telling you that if this becomes a story, it won't be a nice one. It'll be CEO's inappropriate fixation on vulnerable young woman, and no amount of good intentions survives that headline." I told her I wasn't fixated. I told myself the same thing on the elevator ride down, and I almost believed it until I saw Maya come through the front doors that evening, favoring her left side the way she'd started doing more often, and felt my whole chest go tight before she'd said a single word. "You look like you're in pain," I said instead of hello. "I'm pregnant and I climbed 4 flights of stairs at my last stop because the elevator was out. I'm allowed one bad face. Sit down. Just for a minute. I have 3 more stops before 9. Maya." I said her name the way you say something you've decided you're not going to argue about. "Sit down." She sat. Not because I'd ordered her to, I want to be clear about that, because it mattered to both of us that I never once tried to be the kind of man who ordered her around, but because for 1 full minute, somebody wanted her to rest more than they wanted her to be useful. She told me later that was rarer than money. We talked for those 10 minutes like we'd been talking for years, not weeks. She told me the baby's father, a man named Derek, had been gone since month 2, the moment the test came back positive and he realized fatherhood didn't fit into whatever version of his life he'd already decided on. She told me about the apartment she'd had to leave when the rent went up past what Swift Dash's unpredictable pay could cover, and the room she rented now above a laundromat that smelled like fabric softener and old pipes. She told me all of it plainly, without asking for pity, like she was reading off a supply list rather than a list of things that had gone wrong. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, because it felt important to ask rather than assume. "Because you keep standing here holding umbrellas and asking real questions instead of the polite kind," she said. "And because I'm tired of pretending I'm fine to people who don't actually want to know if I'm fine." I didn't have a smooth answer for that. I just said, "I want to know." She looked at me for a long second, like she was deciding whether that sentence was safe to believe. Then she stood, picked her bags back up, and said, "Don't make this weird, Ethan," which was her way of telling me she'd let herself believe it a little. I found out what weird would have looked like 2 weeks later, when Wallace, the man I still hadn't fired, because apparently I needed more proof than a rainstorm, decided to file a complaint of his own. Not against me. Against her. He told building management that Maya had been loitering in the lobby without authorization, that she made staff uncomfortable, that a pregnant delivery contractor sitting on a lobby bench for 10 minutes was somehow a security risk in a 42-story tower with 3 armed guards on every shift. I read the complaint the morning it landed on my desk, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt actual heat behind my eyes. Not the performative anger I used in negotiations. Real anger, the kind my father used to get when a supplier tried to shortchange a driver's paycheck. I called Wallace into my office personally, which never happens for a man 3 levels below the executive floor. He came in still wearing that same posture, arms slightly crossed, like he expected to explain himself out of trouble the way he always had. "You filed a complaint against a pregnant woman for sitting down," I said. "Mr. Cole, protocol says." "I don't care what protocol says. I care that you sent a 6 months pregnant woman into a rainstorm 3 weeks ago and laughed while you did it, and now you're trying to get her banned from a building because she looked tired in a chair." His face went a shade paler. "I didn't think you. You didn't think I'd notice. That's the actual sentence you're looking for." I let that sit for a second. "You're done here. Security will walk you out. HR has your severance ready, full, by the way, because I'm not going to be the kind of man who cuts corners on the way out the door even for people who deserve it less than most." He left without much of an argument, because there wasn't one to make. What surprised me wasn't firing him. It was how good it felt to finally act like the man my father raised instead of the man 6 years of boardrooms had slowly turned me into. I told Maya that night, expecting her to be relieved. Instead, she went quiet in a way I hadn't seen from her before. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Yes, I did. Ethan, people already think I'm," she stopped, chose the next word carefully, "angling for something. A pregnant delivery girl gets special treatment from the Billionaire CEO, and now his head of security gets fired the same month. You understand how that looks." "I don't care how it looks." "I do," she said, sharper than I expected. "I have spent my whole pregnancy being looked at like I made a mistake somebody else gets to judge. I don't need people adding gold digger to the list." That stopped me cold, because she was right, and I hadn't thought about it from her side at all. I'd been so busy being angry on her behalf that I hadn't considered what it would cost her to be defended that visibly by a man with my name on the building. "Then tell me what you need," I said. "Not what looks good. What you actually need." She was quiet for a long moment, arms wrapped around herself the way she did when she was deciding how much truth to spend. "I need to not be scared every single day about whether I can afford a doctor's visit," she finally said. "That's what I need. Not you fixing my dignity for me. Just that. The actual thing." I didn't offer her money that night. I'd learned enough about her in 6 weeks to know that handing her a check would have felt like exactly the kind of charity she'd spent her whole life refusing. Instead, I asked her, plainly, if she'd let me help her find better insurance through people I trusted. No strings, no headlines, nothing with my name on it. She thought about it for 3 days before she said yes, and when she did, it felt like more of a victory than any deal I'd closed in years. Somewhere in those months, without either of us marking the exact day it happened, the thing between Maya and me stopped being about a delivery bag and a rainstorm and became something neither of us had a tidy name for yet. It showed up in small ways first. She started texting me pictures of the ultrasounds, not because she expected me to care the way a father would, but because she said I was the only person who asked follow-up questions instead of just saying cute and moving on. I started rearranging meetings around her delivery schedule without admitting to myself that's what I was doing, telling my assistant I needed a flexible afternoon block 3 days a week, which happened to line up exactly with the hours Maya usually came through downtown. We had dinner for the first time on a Thursday in December, not a date exactly, because neither of us used that word yet. I picked a small diner 2 blocks from her apartment instead of anywhere with my name attached to the reservation, because I understood by then that being seen with me anywhere fancy would cost her more than it would ever cost me. This is not what I expected from a man with a building named after his family, she said, looking around at the cracked vinyl booth and the menu with a coffee stain on the laminate. My father used to say the best deals get made in diners, not boardrooms. People tell the truth over bad coffee. Is that what this is? A deal? No, I said. This is just dinner. She smiled at that, small and careful, the kind of smile she gave when she was letting herself want something she wasn't sure she was allowed to want yet. We talked for 2 hours about nothing that mattered to anyone but us, the names she was considering for the baby, the fact that she used to want to be a nurse before life rerouted her twice, the way I hadn't taken a real vacation in 4 years because I didn't trust anyone else to run the company for a week. She asked good questions, the kind that made you realize halfway through answering that you'd never actually said the thing out loud before. Why me? She asked at one point, turning her water glass in slow circles. You could have any woman in this city. Somebody without, she gestured vaguely at her stomach, complications. I don't think of you as a complication. Everybody else does. I'm not everybody else, I said. And for what it's worth, I think most of the women in this city who'd say yes to me are saying yes to the building, not to me. You've spent 3 months trying to talk me out of helping you. That's a new experience for me, Maya. I like it more than I expected to. She looked down at the table, and when she looked back up, there was something steadier in her face. I like you too, Ethan. I just don't know how to do this without it turning into a headline that makes me sound like I planned it. Then we go slow, I said. As slow as you need. Nobody has to know anything until you're ready for them to. We kept that promise for a while. Not because either of us was ashamed, but because Maya had learned, the hard way, that the world was faster to judge a pregnant woman's choices than it ever was to judge a rich man's. I understood that, and for the first time in my adult life, I let someone else set the pace of something I wanted. The first real scare came in late January, on a night cold enough that the delivery apps usually paid triple for anyone willing to work it. Maya wasn't supposed to be working at all by then. I'd been asking her for weeks to slow down, and she'd been telling me, every time, that slowing down was a luxury for people who had savings to slow down into. That night she picked up 2 extra runs anyway, because Grace's crib was still an item on a list instead of a piece of furniture in a room, and Maya had never once let a list item sit unchecked if she could help it. She called me at 9:40, and I knew from the first half-second of silence before she spoke that something was wrong. Ethan. Her voice was thin, stretched over something she was trying hard to keep steady. I don't feel right. Where are you? 4th and Trade. My head won't stop pounding, and my hands are swollen, and I can see these spots when she stopped. I think I need to sit down. Don't move. I'm 5 minutes away. I broke every reasonable rule about driving in a city that night. When I found her, she was sitting on the curb outside a shuttered bakery, delivery bag still looped over one shoulder like she hadn't been able to make herself let go of the job even mid-emergency, face pale in a way that scared me more than anything had in years. I got her into the car, and the whole way to the hospital she kept apologizing, which told me more about how she'd been raised to think of her own body than any conversation we'd had up to that point. I'm sorry, I probably just need water, I didn't eat enough today, Maya, stop apologizing and breathe. The emergency room took one look at her blood pressure and moved fast in the specific, efficient way medical staff move when they're worried but don't want the patient to see it. Preeclampsia, the doctor said, once the numbers came back, dangerously elevated blood pressure, protein in her urine, the kind of thing that could turn from manageable to catastrophic in the space of an hour if it wasn't caught. They admitted her that night for monitoring. I didn't leave the chair beside her bed for 11 hours, and somewhere around 3 a.m., watching the monitor track her heartbeat and the baby's heartbeat in 2 separate steady lines, I understood something about fear that I'd never let myself feel in 6 years of running a company with thousands of employees' futures riding on my decisions. None of that had ever scared me the way that hospital room did. You should go home, Maya murmured around 4 a.m., half asleep, and 4 taped to the back of her hand. You have a 9 o'clock. I cancelled it. You never cancel anything. I've never had a reason like this one. I took her free hand, careful of the 4 line. I'm not going anywhere, Maya. Not tonight, not after tonight. I need you to understand that whatever this becomes between us, you don't have to carry the hard parts by yourself anymore. You've been doing that your whole life because nobody ever stuck around long enough to prove you could set the weight down. I'm sticking around. She didn't answer right away, and when she did, her voice had gone rough in a way that had nothing to do with exhaustion. Nobody's ever said that to me and meant it. I mean it. The doctors kept her 3 more days, adjusted her medication, put her on modified rest for the remainder of the pregnancy, and told her in plain terms that another shift on a delivery bike wasn't a risk worth taking again. She cried when they said it, not from fear this time, but from the particular grief of losing the one thing she'd built with her own 2 hands when everything else had been taken from her by other people's decisions. I understood, finally, why she'd fought me so hard on every offer of help for months. Accepting it meant admitting she couldn't do it entirely alone, and she'd spent her whole life learning that alone was the only version of safe she could count on. I didn't try to talk her out of the grief. I just sat with her through it, the way she'd sat with me through every version of myself I'd been slowly unlearning since the day I held that first umbrella. By the time she came home from the hospital, something between us had shifted into a shape neither of us needed to name out loud anymore. We both already knew what it was. The trouble started the way trouble in families like mine always starts, with a boardroom, and a woman who had never once had to earn anything for herself standing in the middle of it, deciding she had the right to weigh in on my life. My mother, Diane Cole, had run the philanthropic arm of the company since my father died, and she'd built her entire identity around the idea that the Cole name meant something specific, old money behaving like old money, weddings covered in the society pages, a version of legacy that had no room in it for a pregnant courier with a room above a laundromat. She found out about Maya the way everyone eventually finds out about everything in a company that size. An assistant mentioned it to another assistant, who mentioned it to someone on the board, who mentioned it, casually, over lunch, to my mother. She called me into her office, technically my office, but she still thought of the whole floor as hers, on a Monday morning in February, 4 months after that first rainstorm. "I hear you've been seeing someone," she said, no greeting, which was how I knew it was going to be bad. "A delivery driver. Her name is Maya." "I'm aware of her name, Ethan. I'm also aware she's pregnant with another man's child, and that you've apparently fired half my security staff defending her honor like some kind of," she searched for the word, "knight. He deserved to be fired for how he treated her. That's not the point. The point is what this looks like. Your father built this company on a reputation for stability. Predictability. Now the tabloids are one leaked photo away from running Billionaire's baby mama drama under the Cole name, and you're out here playing house with a woman you met handing over a food delivery." I felt the old instinct rise up in me, the one that had spent 6 years learning to smooth things over, to find the version of the truth that kept everyone comfortable. I almost did it. Then I thought about Maya sitting on that lobby bench, tired and dignified and asking for nothing, and I found I didn't have it in me anymore. "Mom, I love her," I said, and it was the first time I'd said the sentence out loud to anyone, including myself. I don't know exactly when it happened. But it happened, and I'm not going to apologize for it because it's inconvenient for the family image. My mother's face went through several expressions before it settled on something colder than I expected. "You barely know this woman." "I know her better than I've known anyone in years. I know she pays her rent late sometimes because she'd rather be late than skip a doctor's appointment. I know she says I'm fine when she means the opposite, and I know that when she finally tells you the truth, it's because she's decided you're worth the risk. I know that she has never once asked me for money, and I know she argued with me for a week before she let me help her find insurance. Can you say that about the last 3 women you tried to set me up with?" She didn't have an answer for that, not a real one. What she had instead was a threat dressed up as concern. "If you go through with this, whatever this is, you understand it complicates your position on the board. There are people who will use this against you." "Then let them try," I said. "I'm not choosing the board over her." I meant it when I said it, and I found out 4 weeks later exactly how much it would cost to mean it. The story broke on a Wednesday, the way these things usually do, from a source nobody could ever quite trace, though I had my suspicions about who benefited most from the timing. A gossip site ran a piece with a grainy photo of Maya and me outside the diner, her hand resting on her stomach, my jacket draped over her shoulders because it had started raining again, some kind of poetic cruelty in that detail that I didn't appreciate until much later. The headline called her the pregnant delivery girl who charmed her way into a billion-dollar empire. The article beneath it was worse. Maya called me at 6 in the morning, voice tight in a way I'd never heard from her, not even in the worst of the early weeks. "Have you seen it?" "I've seen it. They found my old address, Ethan. They found a picture of Derek." They're saying I planned this. That I targeted you. Her voice cracked on the last word, and I heard something in it break that she'd spent 7 months holding together through sheer will. I've spent my whole life being underestimated because I look like someone who needs saving, and now the entire internet thinks I orchestrated this like some kind of con. I'm coming over. Don't. People are outside my building. There's a photographer on the corner. I was already grabbing my keys. Then I'm coming to stand in front of them with you, because you shouldn't have to face that alone, and because I am done letting other people write the story of what this is. I got to her building 20 minutes later, past 2 photographers who shouted questions I didn't answer, up the narrow stairs to the room above the laundromat that smelled like fabric softener and old pipes, the one she'd never once let me pay to upgrade because she said she wanted to earn her own way out of it. She opened the door already crying, not the delicate kind of crying people write about, but the exhausted kind, months of holding it together finally giving out at once. I can't do this, she said. I can't be a headline. I have a baby coming in 6 weeks and I can't have her whole life start with people calling her mother a gold digger before she's even born. I held her for a long time before either of us said anything else. Then I said the thing I'd been circling for weeks without letting myself land on it fully. Marry me. She pulled back to look at me like I'd said it in a language she didn't speak. Ethan, you cannot propose to me because a website called me a con artist. That's not a proposal, that's a rescue mission, and I told you a long time ago I don't need rescuing. This isn't about the article, I said. I've been sitting on this since the diner, Maya. I just didn't want to say it while you were still deciding whether you trusted my reasons. But you should know exactly what my reasons are now, out loud, with cameras outside your door, so nobody gets to pretend later that this was convenient timing. I love you. Not the idea of you, not the story of a CEO saving a delivery girl, you. The way you argue with me about insurance. The way you text me ultrasound pictures at midnight because you can't sleep and you want someone to see them with you. The way you've spent your whole pregnancy proving to a world that keeps underestimating you that you don't need its permission to be strong. I don't want to save you. I want to build something with you. That's different, and I need you to hear the difference. She was quiet for a long time, one hand pressed to her stomach, the other still holding onto the sleeve of my jacket like she wasn't ready to let go of the last steady thing in the room. If I say yes, she finally said, it has to be because it's real. Not because the internet forced our hand. It's real, I said. It was real before the article. It'll be real after everyone's forgotten the headline. She looked at me for a long moment, tears still on her face but something steadier underneath them now. Then ask me again. Properly. Not because I'm crying in a room above a laundromat with reporters outside. So I did. 2 days later, once the initial storm had quieted, in the same diner where we'd had our first dinner, cracked vinyl booth and all, no cameras, no board members, nothing but bad coffee and the truth. I got down on one knee between the booth and the counter while the cook pretended not to watch and the one other customer in the place put down her fork entirely. Maya Bennett, I said, I don't care what anyone else thinks this looks like. I know what it is. It's the first time in 6 years I've wanted to be somewhere more than I wanted to be at work. Marry me. Not because of an article, not because of a baby who deserves 2 names on her birth certificate that both mean something, although she does, but because I don't want to spend one more day pretending I don't already think of you as my family. She said yes with the whole diner watching, and this time neither of us cared who saw. The board meeting where I addressed the story directly happened the following week, and it was, without exaggeration, the most honest 10 minutes I'd spent in that room in 6 years. I stood at the head of the table my father used to sit at and told every single person there exactly what I'd told my mother. I know some of you are worried about optics, I said. I know the article painted a story that isn't true, and I know a few of you were probably relieved when it ran, because it gave you a reason to question my judgment without saying so directly. So let me remove the ambiguity. I'm marrying Maya Bennett. I'm not asking for your blessing, and I'm not going to defend my personal life in a quarterly earnings review. What I am going to tell you is this: my father built this company believing the people who deliver things, who load trucks, who work the counters and the docks, matter exactly as much as the people who sit in rooms like this one. I forgot that for a while. Maya reminded me. If that's a liability to any of you, my office is down the hall, and I'm happy to discuss your exit terms. Nobody took me up on it. My mother, to her credit, called Maya 2 weeks later, not to apologize outright, because that wasn't in her nature, but to ask, stiffly, if she'd like help choosing a caterer for the wedding, which was as close to an olive branch as Diane Cole had ever offered anyone. Maya, being Maya, said yes graciously and then quietly picked half the vendors herself anyway, because she'd learned by then that being handed things and being run over by them looked identical if you weren't careful. Our daughter was born on a Tuesday in April, 5 weeks after the wedding, in a delivery room I never once left, holding a hand that had spent 8 months proving to the entire world it didn't need holding, and finding out anyway that it was better held. We named her Grace, because Maya said the whole story had been about people finally extending some, late as it came. Wallace, as far as I know, never worked in this city's hospitality or security industry again, which I won't pretend not to be satisfied by. My mother sends Grace a card on every birthday, signed with a warmth I still find surprising given where we started. And every few months, when I'm walking through the lobby of Cole Meridian and I see a delivery contractor waiting near the front desk, soaked from the weather or exhausted from a double shift, I stop and ask if they need anything, because I never want to be the kind of man again who has to be shown twice what decency costs. Maya still delivers, if you can believe it, not because we need the money, but because she says she likes remembering exactly how it felt to be the person everyone in that lobby looked past, so she never becomes someone who looks past anyone else. Some Fridays she brings Grace along in the stroller, and half the executives on the ground floor line up just to say hello to the baby who, according to office legend, is the reason the CEO finally fixed the loading dock policy for good. People ask us sometimes how we met, expecting some polished version fit for a magazine profile. Maya usually tells it straight. He held an umbrella over a stranger in the rain, she says, and then he kept doing it, every single day, until I stopped being a stranger. I usually just say she taught me the difference between running a company and actually seeing the people who make it run. There's a framed photograph in my office now, the only personal item on an otherwise empty wall of awards and certificates my assistant insists clients expect to see. It's not a wedding photo, and it's not a portrait of Grace, though we have plenty of both at home. It's a photograph Priya took without either of us noticing, from across the lobby, the week the loading dock policy officially changed, Maya standing under the front awning in her Swift polo, dry for once, laughing at something I'd said, one hand resting on the curve of her stomach like it was the most natural thing in the world to be standing exactly where she was. I keep it there because every time a new hire walks into that office nervous and small, trying to prove they belong, I want them to see it and understand something my father spent 40 years trying to teach me before I finally learned it on my own: the people everybody else walks past are usually the ones worth stopping for. Maya still keeps her old delivery bag in the hall closet, worn thin at the seams, and every so often Grace pulls it out and drags it around the house like a toy, not old enough yet to understand what it means, only that it makes her mother smile a particular way when she sees it. Someday I'll tell her the whole story properly: the rain, the umbrella, the lobby bench, the headline that tried to make her mother small and failed. I'll tell her that the people who are the easiest to overlook are very often the ones who end up changing everything, if somebody is finally willing to stop moving long enough to notice them. Would you have noticed her in that lobby, or would you have walked past like everyone else did? And have you ever had someone finally see you at the exact moment the whole world had decided you weren't worth a second look? Tell me your story in the comments below. If this one got you, leave a like, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.